Thank you for joining us. This event is called Eureka, Transforming an Idea into an Invention. And I'm so happy to have Justin Cotton and Naima Kearney with me. So I'll just do a short presentation on how to encourage innovation in your child. So basically, just provide materials that encourage creativity, let them play. Play is so important and give them the room to play. Encourage the use of imagination and inquiry as far as like modeling how to find out information is great. So let's say if a child gets stuck on something, encourage perseverance and thinking outside of the box, right? And also be mindful of language, like using language that helps them to try it again over and over again, because that's a part of the innovation process and creativity process, is to just make mistakes, look at it a different angle, you get stuck, come back to it. So developing that perseverance of like, I can do this a different way is great. And encouraging independent thinking. So I know it may be tempting, like when a child is stuck, like to try to tell them what to do, or like it may be hard to watch them become frustrated in the process, but definitely just let them work it through and guide them in a way. Of course, if it's information that they don't have yet or they don't know yet, like provide that information that will help them get to the solution, or and even sometimes not even being comfortable without a solution sometimes, right? Like, I didn't get a solution today, I may not ever get a solution, but that process of making mistakes, you learn something in the process while making the mistakes. So of course there's much more ways to encourage innovation, those are just a few, right? And we're going to have a conversation, so we'll talk about that. So I just wanted to talk about the Black Inventors Challenge that I have going on right now on Theatrematics website, on Instagram and Facebook. So for example, Dr. Lonnie Johnson, he worked at NASA and he invented the Super Soaker and the Nerf gun. So he had a prototype, which we'll talk about, like a prototype. I'm sorry, do you mind speaking? What's your name again, young lady?
Noel.
Noel. Okay. Do you know what a prototype is? And it's fine if you don't know. Like, that's what we're here for.
I do not.
Yes. Go ahead. Tell me what a prototype is.
I don't.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought I heard you say you do. My apologies. I have to listen better. Okay. So a prototype basically is like when you're trying to make something, like something's in your head, right? So you have this idea, so you're going to make, like, you're going to play around to try to make a model, like a first example of it to see if it works. That's like kind of what a prototype is. So he made the Super Soaker. Have you ever heard of the Super Soaker gun or the Nerf gun, Noel?
Yes.
Okay. So he made his first prototype when he was a child. So basically, when he's like 8, 9, he's playing around making projectiles. So like he used pressure to push something out. Like he would use a pipe, or and like, he just played around as a child. Then as an adult, he actually made the real Super Soaker water gun. And also, what's important about this situation, it was an accident. He actually was working on something else. Like, as he's working on something else, he, like, the machine is, it somehow, like, the water just started spurting out. And then he looked at it and he said, wow, that would make a really cool water gun. And then he said, wait a minute, like, I could do this. I could make this water gun. And look, worldwide, we have this Super Soaker. So again, going back to the other points before, mistakes are good. Be comfortable with mistakes. You never know, it might lead you in another direction of creating something else. So always be comfortable with mistakes and comfortable with being frustrated sometimes. So I just wanted to point that out about Dr. Lonnie Johnson. Oh, also one more thing. I don't know if it was him, but it was another inventor that I came across. Just like common stories. The parents gave their children room to play. And I mentioned that before. So there was this other inventor who he was in the house and he was, playing around with things, just trying to experiment with chemicals, I guess. And a fire started in his house. So thankfully the house didn't burn down, but the parents did not become upset with him. They said, let's get him a portable device, like for heating, like a burner, a portable burner, and he's now going to have to work outside. So they let him, experiment outside. So that was like a common thing that I saw with a lot of inventors. They have parents who notice, like, oh wow, my child likes to play around, create, play with chemicals, do this. It may not be safe here. Let me give them their space. That goes back to the space point. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, just wanted, before we start the conversation, I wanted to also point out that the United States Patent and Trademarking Office, which we'll talk about, it has a website for kids. And I'll just go there. And I think this is amazing, and it again shows how important our children are. Our children are the future innovators. Like, everything that you see now, all the cell phones, everything, it once was in a child's mind. Like, the adults were children before, and they had these traits that they just like to explore. So I love that the USPTO has this website for kids, because they know that you, Noelle, you are like the future inventor, right? So let's just look at, let's see a couple of things. Let's say for kids, right? They even have characters here, young inventors. They have a list of people who invented the products that they invented. I read about her. Yeah, this is like a machine, a device that she has to dry dogs. Like when they're wet, it quickly dries them out. So I definitely encourage you to look at the USPTO website for kids. Just I think the extension is like /kids, but if you put USPTO plus kids for the Google search, it'll come up. And they even have activities that you can do at home for playing around with experimenting STEM, basically STEM activities. So that's basically my little presentation, just to encourage innovation and free thinking, mistakes. Please be comfortable with mistakes. And now I will stop sharing my screen. Again, this is very informal. You can feel free to talk to us if you want to. And I will start by asking questions to John Cotton.
Actually, should we introduce ourselves first?
Yes. So that was going to be my first question. Like, please tell us your background and yeah, like what you do and how you got there, basically.
Actually, I'm happy to defer to Naima. Ladies first.
Oh, that's right, gentlemen.
Oh,
Okay, let me unmute you. Well, actually, can you unmute yourself? I can't unmute you. I think that was the most used phrase of the year, they said.
Definitely.
Unmute yourself. You're muted. All right. So, Naima, please tell us about yourself, how you got to do what you're doing or what you did.
So my name is Naima Kearney. My background is in electrical engineering. I also have a dual degree. I was in a dual degree program at Spelman College. So I have a lot of science background as well. And during that time, I did a lot of internships, probably like twice as much as most people. In material science and mechanical engineering. And then my specialty is semiconductors. Semiconductors is what I did at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I worked as a
what is a semiconductor?
A semiconductor, it is a material that basically you use it in all types of electronics because you can control the electrical response. So that's very useful as far as creating integrated circuits. You can put all of these circuits in a small area. So that's how you are able to have these super small devices. And it drives the innovation in that area is so fast paced that so we get inventions all the time. Um, so that's in my area. We did both the inventions and also the methods.
Okay, we're gonna get to that in a second.
Okay.
So now, John Cotton, is your turn. Let us know who you are, and yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Cotton. I'm a mechanical engineer by training after working for some companies that worked in consumer products. And it was something as simple as putting glue on a cereal box, even though it doesn't seem really complex, it's pretty big business. So I had a chance to work in a company that did that, a company that actually designed circuit breaker panels. So I had a chance to understand how things were made. And when you see things getting made, it kind of affects how you think about how things should be made. Early on, I was more into Legos, blocks, and that kind of thing as a kid. And that kind of went into why I decided to major in engineering. After working in engineering for a few years, I went back to school well, actually, let me back up. I went to Georgia Tech for my engineering degree. So a lot of my classmates were dual degree from Spelman and Morehouse. So it was a lot of fun to kind of see people who had both the hard science and the engineering in one. It gave them a great leg up and a great advantage. As far as the law and MBA, I went to Georgia State for that. And my plan was to become a patent attorney because it's a great use of all the different skills together. You have the engineering that teaches you how to do something. You have the law that shows you how to navigate the legal part, in this case, the patent part, the legal process involved there. And part of it's legal and part of it isn't, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. And the business part, how do you take your idea, hopefully with a patent, and turn it into a business, turn it into a product, or into something you can hopefully sell to somebody else if you don't want to make it into a company yourself. So I actually started my own patent firm a few years ago after working with some Silicon Valley attorneys. But my patent firm focuses on small inventors. One of the questions I know we'll be talking about later on are the different changes in patent law that make it easier, theoretically, to get something patented. And the biggest change now is what they call micro entities. We'll get into more details later. But my law firm is specifically about helping individual inventors, which can be anything from a very small business to inventors like Noel, who have a great idea, who want to find a way to protect it, and they need somebody to help them navigate that process. So since then, I've actually moved more into software engineering. And the reason why is because many of my clients, when I was a patent attorney, were software developers. So I actually just changed careers about a year or two ago, but I still provide a lot of advice to friends, family, and otherwise referrals who just want some idea of what the patent process is like. And I've always been focused on entrepreneurs who are trying to do that because their processes tends to be a little bit more complicated than the bigger companies who have patent applications cranked out all the time.
Thank you. Wow. So my question for you is, what were you like as a child? Like you mentioned, John, that you were, I'm sorry, Justin. Why do I keep saying John? I don't know why.
I'm either John, Justin, Joseph. I get all of them.
No.
So it's all good. I'll respond either way.
Okay, Justin.
Always things with the J.
Yeah. Okay, so what were you like as a child? Like you mentioned playing with Legos all the time.
Mm.
So I'm Noel, my background is more with theater. Like I like the performing arts, but my mom forced me to like be really good at math, always drilling me in math. So that's why I'm into the performing arts and math. But I can say I didn't play much with Lego. So I'm curious because both of you are like engineering. So were you very curious as a child? Let's start with Naima. What were you like as a child?
So as a child, I was very curious. I did do a lot of reading, some dance. My mom actually taught some African dance. She's a playwright. So I so I was involved in a lot of production. She used to teach creative writing after school. I was involved in that. So creativity is very important because it's solving problems creatively. I
Play with wires as a child?
Excuse me?
Did you play with wires?
No, not wires. I actually, I was just involved in science. I was a science fair person. Okay. My mom pushed me in that because she didn't have that background. So she wanted to make sure I had a science background. And that's the way I explored a lot of, whenever I thought about something I didn't know about something, that was my way to explore it. One of the projects was when my mom was pregnant. I did a project about reproduction. So I came to all of her doctor's appointments and took notes, and so it was interesting, and I was able to share that information with people, even though, maybe some parents weren't totally into that. But in addition to that, my grandfather is actually an electrical engineer. So, however, that's not where I was going until my junior year. He got me to go to a program at Howard, summer camp, electrical engineering
So
camp.
junior year in high school.
Yes, junior year in high school. So before that, I was not being an engineer. I didn't know that much about engineering, just science. So at that program, they had amazing professors who were the Dr. Momo. He during the program, there was a power outage in Nigeria, and he flew to Nigeria to fix their power. And I was like, wow, that's
Wow.
that's amazing.
Like he was the one person. They right. Nigeria. Well, wherever the power outage was,
right.
They need him.
Right. Because I went to his office one time. He had a stack of patents on the table. So he's amazing, and in the field of power generation. So he's very so with that, I was like, wow, electrical engineers do make a difference. I was thinking, like more in the biology health field, but also electrical engineers also do very important work. So that's what took me to college in there.
All right, so Justin, your turn.
I mentioned Legos before, but I think in the end, one of the best gateways to science is science fiction. I think a lot of times looking at a lot of the cartoons on Saturday morning, whether it was the robot kind of stuff or the superheroes, you always thought about, well, how can I learn more about whatever they're talking about? Some of it might actually be real life. Some things might be ahead of their time. I know people at one point who were saying many things you'll see now as far as personal electronics are things you probably saw in a science fiction movie 10, 20, 30 years ago. But in the end, sometimes that turns into a real product later on because people want to know more. I think one good example of it is, and this is probably a little esoteric, but in a cartoon called Cowboy Bebop a few years ago, there was one part where they were trying to transfer money from one person's account to somebody else's. One person connected their phone or something to another person's device, swiped a card, and it automatically sent the money over. That came out in 1998. And now we have things like Cash App. And even before now, we had PayPal. So it just seems like the best way to become an inventor or have an idea for something really comes down to how, as you mentioned, how creative you are. And we want to make sure that for kids, we're always encouraging that. Other examples you mentioned before about making mistakes and it turning into something, there have been some really well documented examples of somebody trying to invent one thing and inventing something else that was actually more popular. One short example, not of what I just mentioned about one thing turning into something else, but something that you want to fix could turn into a solution for a lot of other people. They say that the necessity is the mother of design or the mother of invention. One example I read about a long time ago, and a lot of what I did in my small patent form was kind of share these stories on Pinterest and Instagram about here's a fun patent story, something somebody made. But one example was there was a guy in the 1800s who had cows on his property. And whenever people who were moving other cows around across properties, the cattle rustlers would come by, they would come right over his property. His cows would kind of go with the crowd. So he said, I'm tired of that happening. Let me get this small piece of wire, use this coffee grinder I have in the kitchen, turn it a few times, and now it's something that's kind of jagged. I can make a fence out of these things. So now I can actually keep other cows and other cowboys off the property as they pass by and keep my cows in. And that was the invention of barbed wire. One person trying to solve one problem. And now it's something you'll see almost everywhere that people have cattle. It's weird how a lot of things that get made are because one person has a problem and they figure out, how can I fix this? The word engineer means to be clever. And a lot of times you take what you have or you get clever with pieces of a lot of different things and you're able to make something that benefits you and other people. But for me, it was about finding out the things that you see in science fiction that somebody thought of just because you mentioned a theater before and telling stories. This is something that makes sense in the world of this story. But then you realize there's no reason why it can't exist in the real world as well. And that kind of gets people thinking, kids and even people who aren't as young, people who are young at heart, as we listened earlier on, to say, well, what can I do to make something interesting in the world that we live in?
Wow. I love that. I love that you mentioned the imagination fiction, science fiction. Like, you envision it, you just make it up, but eventually it could become a reality. So, yes, be creative with what you envision. So, my next question is could you tell us? So, I'll ask Justin first and then ask Naima about her experience, like working in the office of the patent office. But let's say we have a young person here. Let's say she has an idea and she wants to make it into a reality. Like, what would be the process if you could give it in short or as short as it could be? Like, what should she do?
The tricky part about patents is, and I'm sure that our examiner can give us a much better idea about this, but I think as far as the attorney side, the biggest problem we have is showing customers how to make an idea into an invention. The idea is basically the spark, but the invention is basically an inferno, a volcano. And you have to take the initial idea and actually turn it into something physical. And that can be the hard part because there are a lot of great ideas that don't actually turn into something at some point. But the first challenge for somebody who wants to invent something is try to build something physical based on your idea, or if it's a method or a process, outline how you would do it. Because the more detail you provide, the more definition it has, the better you'll be able to present that to the patent
And
office.
when you say outline, that would include drawing as well, like, you know.
Right.
Mhm.
It can be steps, drawings. You mentioned prototypes, which are just basically putting something together. It could be made of metal, it could be made of clay, whatever you can think of that actually gives life to whatever your idea is and gives it a physical presence. That's really the first step I usually say to somebody who says, I want to make this work. What should I do? I said, start building, whether it's Legos, like I mentioned, just find a way to like bring it into reality. And then you can make it better over time. But the real challenge as you go to the patent process is you have to have enough stuff, enough meat and potatoes as it is, to actually explain to somebody else how to do it, which is really the test of the patent process.
Right. And so for a child, they would definitely have to go to an adult maybe after they have like their initial drawing, saying mommy, uncle, auntie, like, and then maybe, like, would you say that? Would you suggest like an adult also helping?
I would agree. I think usually an adult will know the best place to go. Sometimes it's just a matter of having the right materials. If there's a lab they can use, sometimes STEM labs have all kind of things you can basically play with, and some things you can buy yourself for your own, basically garage inventing. But it's all a matter of knowing which tools. And obviously, an adult will be the best person to figure out. Okay, I know somebody who works in this field or somebody who works in this company. Maybe they can point you to what kind of tools you would need to start building something out. Even if you might get somebody to make you a prototype, for instance, but as you'll hear, there are different kinds of inventions. And if it's electrical, you might need somebody who has access to other kinds of tools. But I think I think Naima's experience in electrical engineering might give you a better idea because mechanical engineers, we basically are putting
This
stuff
stuff
together, which
together.
might look like junk sometimes. But when it's electrical, it has to actually be a little more put together, I think.
Right. So Naima, can you talk about that aspect? Like
Well,
really.
I think it's hard because it would be very difficult. Well, especially in my field, for like a individual inventor to come to that part because you need so much expensive equipment to kind of produce inventions like that. But I would say, like Justin was saying, you need to be very detailed, even to the point of grammatical errors. Sometimes they can cause the patent to be rejected because if you don't understand what they're saying, pictures as well are very important because the examiner has to have like a picture in their mind. So if you can draw that, that helps a lot so they can compare it to other a lot of it is images that we're researching to compare the invention to. So if you can do that, it makes it a lot easier and we could just, like, oh yeah, this is what you need to change. And that makes it a lot quicker. It helps us understand because otherwise we can go years back and forth trying to understand what you're really trying to claim.
All right. And so I actually would like you to add on to that. So let's say if um, Noelle has like an idea, she draws it out, detailed what she wants to do. And, her mom like helps her with contacting the right people, submitting it. Um, so basically what we're talking about is the United States Patent and Trademark office. Like it's this big office
Mhm.
that anyone who wants to invent something and they get a number. So let's say in Jingle Jangle, what was his name? Geronicus? I think that was his name. So he invented the toys. If he wanted to protect his idea, which is important because he didn't protect it, so the other character, I cannot remember his name. I should have looked this over before I started this, but the other character stole his idea. But if Geronicus would have sent that book to the US Patent Office and like got a number for every single one of his toys that he had invented, if the other person, the other character, I'm sorry, Noel, do you know their character's name? The character's names?
No, I just remember Geronicus, and that was it.
Okay, well, good. I'm not the only one. All right, thank you. So, so basically, when it comes to, oh wait, I'm sorry. Okay, so if he would have protected that idea, then any toy that would have been created afterwards, he would have gotten a percentage or something. Am I saying this correctly? Is that how it works with the patent office?
You want to answer this, Naima?
I think you're.
Okay, so basically, we probably should talk about the patent process itself,
Yes.
but there are a lot of things, there are a lot of boxes that have to be checked to get a patent in the first place. But the most important thing, going back to your example, is getting to the office first. First to invent, well, yeah, we'll just say it's first to invent. Different people could actually invent the exact same thing, but it's all a matter of proving you got to it first and actually getting to the office to show that. If somebody who invented it after you gets there first, you can still basically complain and prove that you actually were the first person to invent it. But if there is a conflict, it doesn't automatically mean you get a percentage of something. It basically means somebody whose patent is already in process can get held up because somebody is complaining about it. Or, and this is the job of the examiner, when they're actually looking at patent applications, they have to look at not just, is there something already like this exactly as you filed it in the world or being published or actually in the process of being patented? Could a combination of those things be the same thing as what you invented? That's called, well, do you want to talk about obviousness or novelty, or should I take care of that? Because those are the two most important things you might need to touch on to kind of
No, yeah,
explain.
go ahead, share, because this is foreign to me as well. So,
Yeah,
like,
and I feel free to jump in if I'm doing this
Oh, no,
wrong.
you're fine.
Most of what I know is really more of the legal part of it, but not the practical part. But the part that you know is probably more useful. But I'll just say that as far as something being patented, there are different check boxes I talked about. There, first is patentability. There are things that can and can't be patented. You know, as far as legend goes, people say, well, Benjamin Franklin discovered lightning or electricity because of the key in the kite. That's great. He did not invent lightning. Lightning is a natural phenomenon, which means it can't be patented. You can't patent 1+2 because that's something that kind of is the concept itself isn't something that somebody invented. So there are different things that can and can't be patented. You have things you can try to get patented. You have big collections of things which might turn into a machine. You have a process of making something which can be patented. You can make a new plant by splicing things together. And one of the most weird kinds of patents, I've only seen this one or two times in my own practice, but you have design patents. Patents have to be useful, but a design patent is something that's useful just because of how it looks. It's ornamentation. I'll give a quick example, and hopefully it's not a boring one. This goes back to my work at a company that puts glue on cereal boxes. But anyway, there are different size holes in the nozzle that puts glue on a box. But they're so small, it's kind of hard to tell how big the hole is just by looking at it, unless you actually measure it with a really specific tool. So one guy at the company had an idea of, okay, if we can actually put a color-coded band around our nozzles, it might be clear what the size is without having to measure it out. So in that case, the ornamentation, the color band, was useful, which is also required for something to be patented, to make it clear what size the hole was. So in short, there are different things that can be patented, some things can't be. Going back to what I said a moment ago, what you invented has to be new or novel. It can't already exist out there exactly as you explained it. That usually isn't too hard to get around. The real hard part, especially for patent attorneys like me, is you'll invent something, you haven't seen it anywhere else online, you haven't seen a product about it, you haven't seen it in a scientific journal. But when you submit the application to the patent, the USPTO, they'll say, well, okay, it doesn't have any issue about being new, but I see 2 other patents or 3 patents, or patent applications. If I put all these together,
It's just,
Together, they're basically the same thing, and that's
wow.
called obviousness. If
Okay.
somebody, it would have been obvious to somebody in your field with your skills that I can put these together and get to that thing. Now, there are other things that you need to worry about too, but those are like the big three. Those are really the first three in that code section. So I think, I'm not sure if you want to add on to that, Naima, but those are kind of the things that most of my patent clients don't always understand going in.
Wow.
Well,
Okay. Yeah,
I
that's
just
interesting. No, go ahead.
I was going to say about obviousness, just to give an example, say it's a silver bottle and
Mhm.
you invented a gold bottle, and it's basically a very similar method. But, you know, somebody's going to reject it and say, okay, somebody in the art, somebody who knows how to make metal bottles would have known to make a gold bottle instead of a silver bottle. But for example, if you made a glass bottle or if out of some new glass, that would be a different process, and that would be, you can't really say that's obvious.
Oh, okay.
One thing I wanted to mention too that's important about patents is, well, let me read something to you. Where does patent law come from? And the answer is it comes from the oldest law in the land, the Constitution. I'll read it to you. The part that actually gives the Congress the right to legislate on patents and copyrights, incidentally, is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8. To promote the science of useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So what that means is Congress was given the right by the Constitution to make laws that let inventors have the exclusive right to what they make. Exclusive right basically means a monopoly. When you apply for a patent, you're saying if this is approved, I want to have the basically 20 years from the date of application. Generally, I'm the only person who has the right to make, use, sell, offer for sale, or import this thing in the United States. The question is, what are they doing that in exchange for? The government doesn't give us that for nothing. In exchange, we have to teach other people about the first part of what I mentioned, to promote the progress of science. You promote the progress of science by making what you invented public. The word patent literally means open. So you're basically saying when you have a patent that's applied for, actually approved, it's all public record. So people who are thinking about making things can say, okay, here's something. I might get an idea to make something else based on what you've published. So in exchange for making this open to the world, especially, well, making it open to the US, but really the world now, we'll get this person 20 years head start to basically make money off their invention. In a way, copyright works very much the same way, but it's easier to get a copyright and it lasts longer. But the thing about patents is the protection is actually a lot stronger. We don't have to go into copyrights, but I want to make it clear that there's something being exchanged when you get a patent.
Thank you. I didn't even think about the Constitution and patent law.
Right. And when your patent expires, anybody can use it. That's public property.
So
Right.
patents, uh, are they usually 20 years, or you just said that for the example? It's not like I know copyright is like 99 years.
Yeah, copyright is life plus 99. So there
Oh,
are some copyrights
nice.
that are just becoming public, what's the word? Public, not public record, but public domain,
Domain.
because somebody died 100 years ago, basically. But as far as the 20 years, I said generally because there are some times where it won't be exactly 20 years from application. Naima knows more about that because there's some nuances about the process itself where you might get less or maybe a little bit more, but I forget exactly how that works.
Okay. So I'm just gonna like restate what you were saying. Basically, with patents, you put it on record, your invention, your idea, and it's purpose that the public could see it and get even more ideas from what they see on record.
Right.
And eventually that patent will expire. So basically is even more creativity for people out there to, invent. But Naima, I have a question.
Mhm.
Can you talk more about like how does the USPTO work? Like it seems like, you know, is there like a separate department from mechanical and then electrical? Like, yeah, like how
Right.
does that work with communication?
Yes, technically, I think a lot of areas are combined. Because my area was, I mean, you can have a semiconductor patent that includes organic chemistry and electrical, and there's some mechanical issues in there, but they want to classify it so that the patent examiner who looks at it is going to know about the main subject matter. So I've mostly, due to the classification, I've mostly just gotten semiconductor patents and mechanical. I mean, if you get the wrong one, you can put it in another area because you're like,
So I just want to, just in case,
Mhm.
I want you to explain what mechanical versus electrical is.
Okay.
So if I were to say it in my way of seeing it, mechanical is like how something moves. Like, let's say this, like a function,
Right.
like,
Mhm.
okay, this is opening and closing. Or if I had a, well, kids don't know flip phones these days. But like, just like the physical function of it. But electrical is like what's inside of this, like,
Mhm.
right? Is that a way?
Yes.
Please, please
I mean, as
do
long as
better
it's
with explaining.
like an electrical device, there's some type of current going through it. Usually there's like a some type of power involved.
Mhm.
So, and then mechanical. I've worked in some mechanical, like micro mechanical devices that are more about the movement of the
Okay.
device. Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, if you were in your department, like talk us through, let's say a file comes before you.
Right. So patent application comes to me. So it would most likely be in the semiconductor area because it has already been classified and sorted in that way. There's classifier patent examiners who decide, this is this class and this is another class. So I don't actually deal with that part of it, but there are people who decide if it's mechanical, what type of mechanical invention, or electrical or organic chemistry. So I've had mixed inventions. So they have to decide, is it more organic chemistry or is it more semiconductors?
Mm.
Um, so who would be the best person to examine this? So in those cases, I probably would have to consult an organic chemistry person as well, just to make sure I understand it fully.
Mhm.
But so the process, I'm looking at the application and make sure it makes sense. There's nothing. Then I'm looking at the claims. The claims is really the legal bounds of the invention. They can. It's good to have all those details in there so you can refer back to and understand what they're claiming. But the claims themselves is like the property.
Can you give an example claim, just like simple one that we
Uh,
like claims?
I so you could say I'm claiming, so you have to be very direct about, these are my claims, I'm claiming a round paper heart with 3 holes at the top and 3 holes at the bottom. Just be very detailed.
Okay, so claiming sounds like you're describing what your invention is.
Right, but just in the most basic way. This is what I've invented,
Okay.
and
Okay,
mhm.
thank you. Mhm.
And
All right,
we're
so
really- Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to say that from the patent agent or patent attorney side, the weird thing about the language is like everybody has their own style of basically making the claim, and
Hmm.
sometimes the words can get really squirrely. I think when I do it, I've gotten in the habit of writing it in such a way because the person who taught me wrote it this way. I would say claims an apparatus consisting of one or more of X, Y, and Z. The X configured so as to do one of these three things. Or it's interesting how it can be really weird when you say, of all the things I've described in this paper, the specification, this is what I'm thinking exactly is mine, like you were saying, the part that you're claiming. But it's just interesting how I've seen some applications that have gotten kicked out that were trying to be very specific, and I've seen some that would seem like they were written very basic, and they were like, okay, this is great, like, can I write mine that simply and get a check mark? Because I had something I was very proud of how I wrote them, but I was like, why is this person pushing back so much? I thought I wrote this perfect. But anyway, and we forgot to mention that the application itself doesn't just have to make what you did public, it has to actually teach somebody how to do it. So it has to be pretty detailed. But then the claims, the most important part, as you heard, it has to make it clear to the examiner, this is the part that you basically have to vet. You need to figure out whether or not what I'm saying is mine really is.
wow. Thank you. So, okay, so continue with the process. Now, you get the file, You look at the claims, then
Right.
what?
So I take the claims and I'm drawing my own invention. Like they can do their own drawing and I'm using that to compare, but I make my own drawing because it could be different from what they're saying it is. So what they're drawing. So I'm like, okay, so they just have this heart with holes, even though they may say something else elsewhere. That's the only thing they put in the claim. So I'm taking the claim and comparing that to other inventions, not the pictures necessarily.
Right? Interesting.
hmm And then so we look at all these international databases. We're not looking just in the
Wow.
US, we're looking in China, we're looking in Korea, we're looking in Europe. Whatever international databases we have access to, we're looking at all of those and comparing their invention to see if there's something that's pretty much the same thing. And then at that point, we write, most likely, first time, we would probably reject it. And so usually it's just, it comes in, usually the attorneys write pretty broadly to see how much they can get away with. So,
So it's a game. It's a game out there.
Yes.
So we mostly go back and forth with the attorney. We write up the rejection, send it to the attorney. I guess you can talk about the other side of that, but then the attorney will come back with another action and basically say why we're wrong, or they'll change the claim so they'll be more specific in most cases.
Right.
Wow.
So that's true. We try to get as broad as we can to see what they're going to push back on. So when we first get that letter back, and I want to mention that the first letter we get back could actually take a few years. That's probably the most the part that requires the most patience in the process. Once you've actually distilled down what you invented into something physical, wrote everything out, made your pictures, just your alternatives, your steps and everything, and then got your claims written out. I have one patent application right now I haven't heard back from in more than 2 years. And normally it'll be 18 months, but I'm guessing they're pretty backlogged right now, or maybe some art units are. But in my case, when I actually hear back, it's called a first office action. And usually it is a rejection, as you heard. They'll tell you what exactly the grounds are for why you're not getting. We mentioned novelty. If something is found that they argue makes this so what I'm doing isn't new, they'll basically tell me what patent application or patent that was. And they'll actually point to where exactly what I wrote is like what was written in that application or patent itself. They'll also mention, okay, well, we found a few things put together, like what you invented, this other patent basically of the 10 claims you said, it basically covers 6 of those, but it doesn't cover the last 4. But this other one does. So together,
Right.
that's going to be rejected. So, but the important thing there for, I guess, the nuance of the practice for a patent attorney is look at what they pointed to and find differences. Because our response will say, in first office action, examiner said XYZ. Respectfully, applicant argues that this is not like what the applicant does for this reason. Or they'll say, well, this thing that you pointed out as being as a basically preempting, or not preempting, but I forget the term for it. Contemplating, I forget what the actual word is, but whatever they say is like yours, we'll say, well, you claim it does this, but it doesn't actually do what I'm trying to do. And I have to make a good case for why that happens. And a lot of times that even won't be enough. They'll say on the second time they respond, applicant said this, but it wasn't persuasive. Like, no, don't say that. So, but anyway, sometimes you'll come back and you have to change your claims. You can amend claims as long as what you change doesn't go beyond what you wrote in the rest of the application. You can't say you're claiming a red car. The examiner says, no, there's already a red car out there. You say, okay, well, in that case, I claim an orange car. Like, okay, well, you didn't put orange in your application. You can't claim that now. That's new matter. But anyway, it's the terms and like the process are really an art and science. But it's interesting looking at it from an examiner side and an attorney side, because it's basically a negotiation. And it really depends on what the invention is. But as I'm finding out over the last few years, it might also come down to the personalities of people involved.
Exactly. No, I was going to speak on that because there are patent examiners, the first time it comes to them, they see one claim that's like really close to being patentable. They'll just call up the attorney and say, wait, why don't we just fold this in here and just give you a patent right now? And
can I have their name?
So what kind were you, Naima?
Here it comes.
I wasn't really supposed to do that. So we were a conservative unit. So we just
You follow the rules. That's right.
Right.
You were hard on people.
Uh,
All right. Well, I have about a couple more questions, and then I want to open up to questions from those who are participating. So my one question is about the whole new, like I saw in publications that, oh, now patenting is easier for individual versus like companies. It was so much like harder before. That's my first one, and then I want you guys to speak on myths, misconceptions, maybe like, so anyone could jump in on that.
I will speak on the first part of those. That's basically the bedrock of my practice. But I will say one of the first myths is that these new rules make it easier. The new rules make it less expensive. There's a certain fee for different parts of the patent
All
process.
right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me just break that down a little bit more because considering age group, right?
Yeah.
So before, the way it worked with patents is that you had to be like a larger company. Am I
Well, not exactly. It's not that you
okay?
have to be. It just it comes down to cost basically. Basically, the reason why it's easier. This is really when they say easier, what they mean is less expensive for people to file a patent now, so more people can afford to. Before, and this is actually a much longer time ago, there was a certain fee for anybody, company, individual of any age, any size, to file a patent. Then they made another basically class of inventor called a small entity, which means if you qualify based on the size of your business, you can pay half that price. The most recent change, and this is only maybe 5 years ago, I can't remember exactly, they made another class where you pay 1/4 of the price. So that's really the only change. The rules are the same. The only
Okay.
difference is if you qualify for the smaller tier of like how big your company, or if it's just one person, you can just pay a lot less.
Okay.
And that's why it was more accessible to more people, because if you have a great idea and you're a garage, or as I call them, garage coffee shop or workbench inventor, you may have a great idea but just can't afford the process. But if you're paying a quarter of that price, at least you're in the game.
Oh, thank you.
And my patent practice was focused on people like that, people who are new to the process, who didn't have a lot of money, basically people who are just starting a company or just had a great idea and wanted to get it out there. But now that they changed the rules, they felt comfortable, taking the plunge.
All right. So Naima, what would you say is a myth or misconception about the process?
Well, he spoke to it being expensive and it sometimes taking a very long time. I would say don't let that discourage you. And also, so they do have, like we were just talking about, have these things in place to make it a lot easier for an individual inventor to be able to patent an invention. However, I would say it is, if you can, try to hire an attorney, because I've only worked with one individual inventor before, and it was just so much that they didn't know, and I couldn't really tell them because that's not my job to spend hours explaining stuff to them. So I just kind of felt sorry for them. Um, so I would suggest
They were lost in the abyss.
yes,
Confusion.
get help.
Get an attorney, yes. So what advice would you give to a child who like, may want to invent something? Like they have an idea. They want to play around. What advice would you give a child?
Um, I mean, keep working at it, and maybe they can do some research on their own to see what's out there. Get some ideas from that. I mean, that's what patents are for, to help you understand what has been invented. And
How would they go about researching on their own?
okay, so USPTO website. They have other patents are required to be published. So everyone has access to patents at the library or at home. Um, I think depending on the age of the child might need a little assistance, but
Yes.
do like keyword searches and image searches. So
Thank you. What about you, Justin?
I would look at it from that way, and also the opposite. If there's a product that you know a lot about or something that you think is pretty interesting, usually if something is cool, it's either been patented or probably should be patented. But if there's something you like, a device or something, find out what the patent covering that is. And usually it's on their legal page if you're looking at their website, or it might actually be on the product itself. They'll say protected by this or patent pending or whatever. And the reason why it's cool is because you can actually see how they describe it in their patent application. It may give you a good idea of how you might write yours when you do something. It can't be too similar because I mean somebody else already done it, but sometimes it's just kind of cool to see how it was explained in its own application. But beyond that, writing things down, sketching things out, getting an adult involved, especially if you need access to other equipment or just more space to play with something or different tools to kind of tinker with something, make sure you don't lose track of your invention. Sometimes you'll get a great idea, whether it's in a dream or just you were talking to somebody after a movie, but you might forget about it. So if you have just a log of things that you're thinking about, I'll do some of the same thing in my job now. There's something I want to develop. I don't have time right now, but I don't want to lose track of it. I'll just make a note saying it'd be nice to add this feature to whether it's software or whatever. And then later on, when you have time, you have enough detail in the notes you had, or you can add to them along the way, so that at some point, like I have enough here to actually do something. And it's all because I didn't like forget about it after that first spark of imagination.
Wow, that's really good advice. Thank you.
And
All
I
right.
would just add that you want to write down the date.
Yes, do that too.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Have the receipts
Yeah.
for who's first. Thank you so much, Justin and Naima. That was very informative, and I can't wait to share this with others.